Welcome to the Phlo Systems webinar on digitalizing the international supply chain. Let's now move on to our final session of the webinar, which is the expert panel discussion that we're going to have. I would like to invite the panelists to turn on their cameras and their microphones. Diana, Raj, Remy, and Sophie. I'm not sure if we have Andre as well. We might have Andre. He was not necessarily able to join. I do know that Sophie may not be able to join for the whole call, but that's fine. We'll get her for the beginning of it. So yes, if you want to join, and I will just stop sharing so we can see everyone on screen much easier. Lovely. So do we have, do I have my other speakers as well? Ah, yes, lovely, so fantastic. Sophie, Remy, excellent. We're all there, and Raj as well. Welcome, everyone. Very happy to have you all here. I just thought before I ask you to introduce yourselves, I would also use the time to take a final poll of everyone here, because these are some of the questions that we're going to be discussing, and we'll see what everyone has to say. So I'm going to put up the poll, and then I'll ask you to introduce yourselves. So the poll question is, for everyone out there, what is the greatest challenge when it comes to managing supply chain data? Because this is a big issue we've discussed a lot. Is it the lack of data you need? Is it just poor quality data? Is it the disaggregation of data everywhere in silos? Or is it poor interoperability between systems where you already have good data? So if you want to make a few votes there, that's fantastic. And now I'm going to ask my panel to introduce themselves. So if we can start ladies first. Diana, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Ted. My name is Diana Bujova, and I am Associate Professor and Head of Faculty for Politics and International Relations at NCH at Northeastern University here in London. That's great. And what is your connection anyway when it comes to everything to do with trade and trade flow? I have been working closely with TradeFlow to digitize a solution that supports sustainability, and I'm going to hopefully say a little something about it a little later in the discussion. That's great. Thank you very much, Diana. Sophie, please.
Good afternoon. My name's Sophie, and I'm here in my business, York Cocoa House. This is our working chocolate factory here, York Cocoa Works. And we've been working to secure cocoa that can be removed from the commodity market to be traded based on its quality and share those properties with consumers and the general industry to start looking at cocoa based on its speciality features. And we've been working with the TradeFlow team just to be able to start moving towards more transparency, and so start moving towards, because we have big aspirations, and for many of the things that you've addressed today already, Ted, is kind of certainly been our aspiration, but it's been a long process so far, and definitely not as quick as we might like.
No, that's fine. We'll touch on that straight away. Next up, Remy.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Remy Bergeron. Background is 25 years in commodity trading, Louis Dreyfus, Ameropa, BTG Pactual, and more recently in fund management with, in trade finance with Barak Fund Management, and as well other ventures which I carry out with Atria Trade Investment. I'm based in Cape Town, even if you see a desert behind me, this is Namibia.
Yeah, indeed. All right, okay, and it must be freezing down there as well at the moment. It's nice and hot in England. And last but by no means least, Raj.
Hi, thanks for having me here, Ted. My name is Raj Bell. I have been a director with Phlo Systems for a few years since inception. I am in charge of spearheading business development and trying to link the finance piece with the digital operations piece.
That's great. Fantastic. Okay, well, listen, welcome everyone. Let's see what the results of the poll are. I'm closing the poll. I'm going to share the results. When it comes to the greatest challenge to data management, we can see disaggregation of data, poor interoperability as well, take nearly, 3/4 of the votes there. I think that, hopefully we've been doing some convincing there, because this is a lot what we're talking about. So I thought, can we start with this whole issue of data first? And maybe if I can start with you, Sophie, but, data is critical. Where are the kind of key gaps that you have, and what impact is that having actually on your operations?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting, again, kind of listening to the discussion so far today. Data obviously is critical. For us, we are chocolate makers, so we have to undertake every key stage of that production process, from the beginning of the cocoa arriving with us through to the end production of that product. And we've got different data points throughout that whole journey. So for us trying to understand what is the key data that needs to be collected, who needs to collect it, and obviously its timeliness has been kind of a large knot to really kind of untangle. And so that's kind of, it's been very interesting. You then kind of apply, obviously, what data bits do we want coming into that system, and how much can we actually kind of rely on that. But the inputs that we're working with may be several years old. And so therefore actually accessing meaningful data, or kind of bringing in and integrating the data points that are constructive, or that we see being constructed through to the consumer point, really is very, very fragmented.
Absolutely. And Raj, from your perspective as well, where do you see the real kind of gaps, the real problems and the impacts that they're having when it comes to data?
So I've been structuring a lot of these deals over the years in my banking days. I used to work in HSBC and Royal Bank of Scotland. Working capital finance has always been a key focus for the banking industry, but also just for alternative finance lenders. Once you execute and win a specific deal, the biggest challenge is trying to implement it, and implementation requires data. And I can tell you from experience, a lot of the corporates out there today can spend anything between 3 to 6 months trying to gather the correct and right data, which needs to be presented for the correct financing. But that also tells you that internally the operations is struggling to really gather that and trying to fill that gap. So in my experience, I would say that that entire lead time can be reduced into a number of days if the right systems are in place. Because inaccurate data can impact hugely the commodity sector, and it can become stale because of the lead time it takes to actually gather information. And if it becomes stale, it changes the entire investment and risk-making process, because the commodity price can fluctuate, which obviously we all know can negatively impact the cash flow for the trader, but also for the lender. And it can impact the value of the collateral, for example. So data is absolutely key. There is a gap, and at Phlo Systems, we can fill that gap by providing easy access to that data.
Thanks. I wonder if I can move to you now, Remy, because something that you said earlier to us when we were discussing this call is that there is a gap between the digital world and the real world. What did you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that, the basis of trade finance is the ability to finance a transaction and not a borrower. You really focus on the commodity itself, the flow of the transaction, and you rely on the commodity as a collateral. Okay, so your ability to really secure this collateral is essential. And this commodity is not an NFT. It's not a non-fungible token. It's not something which become basically digital. And that's it. It needs to be always reflect back to the physical aspect. A commodity, it could be cocoa, it could be wheat, it could be cashew nuts, will evolve both in terms of quality and quantity. And your ability to really secure your transaction is as good as as the person on the ground to reflect back the information to you. So for me, as a financier or a trader, I will always see that as a critical element. This little gap between the physical and the digital, this process of tokenization is essential and needs to be the subject of all the attention of in terms of securing your transaction.
Absolutely, because that's where the trust comes from, doesn't it? You have to be able to trust the data. So on this issue of trusting data, actually, Diana, you've been working obviously on data itself as well. What kind of challenges and gaps have you found?
Well, the main challenge that I have found in terms of the data I've been working on has been how time-consuming and therefore costly it is for enterprises, organizations from different sectors to do that independently. And so one objective that I have pursued joined here with Phlo has been, whether we can come up with a digital solution that scales up that process and makes it much more accessible and therefore faster for organizations, helps them with planning, measurement and reporting, and in this way, allows them to show good corporate citizenship, but also really contribute to that sustainable agenda that we have been talking about for a long time, but in terms of implementation has in fact encountered quite a lot of difficulties and barriers through approaches and data and so on.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, in fact, that's something I'd like to get onto now, because I think something that I'm certainly aware of in terms of the systems that Phlo Systems are designing is that they bring something that is sorely lacking to the supply chain, which is transparency. And of course, this is critical to make them sustainable. I touched on some of those issues when I was in my presentation as well. So I'm interested to know, how do you see systems like this being used to support sustainability efforts? If you want to start, Diana, and then I'll ask Sophie.
Sure. It's probably worthwhile just broadly defining sustainability, because we talk a lot about it, but actually everyone understands it differently. And that's probably partly because the definition is so broad. But what we have from the United Nations anyways is that sustainability is about meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to do the same. And so I suppose in practical terms, in applied terms, that means that organizations depend on the planet's resources and jointly with communities have vested interest in exploiting these sustainably. And so that requires data for actually planning inputs and measuring through and outputs. So ERPs can support this by bringing transparency in business profitability and growth planning, building business resilience by reducing supply, demand, regulatory and capital risks, and also driving values-based leadership, which to lean on the World Economic Forum is about increasing trust, talent retention, and advancing community relations. And I think some of that was already touched upon on several instances. Really, in particular, I think Christoph talked a little bit about increasing trust. And so that's very important. So my research, and I'm a part of several research groups, and research into select sector majors has showed quite a lot of subtle messaging communications around sustainability amidst attempting to navigate the sustainability transition complexity of frameworks and approaches. We haven't necessarily always found that to be very helpful to advancing sustainability, but equally we understand that it is because there is a maze of these things out there. And so one response that I have worked on and am working on with Phlo has been to advance social return on investment, which is an accounting approach. And we have attempted to digitize it, but also build databases that currently cover the UK and the US, two countries that have been key proponents and massively contributed to the development of social return on investment. And harness also, in conjunction with that, the data opportunity of ERPs to structure and advance sustainable development through, again, the emphasis on planning, measurement, and reporting.
And of course, and all of those things require good data underneath. Well, I wonder if I could move to you now, Sophie, as well, because sustainability is central to your business model and the kind of business you want to build. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. For us getting into the kind of engaging with cocoa and the chocolate production, it's really to take a quality approach to chocolate, its production, consumption, sharing it, and obviously the cocoa inputs that go into that. And obviously Diana's definition of sustainability, of course, that's a core kind of shared objective, but we have to talk about sustainable relationships and kind of what does sustainability mean when we're actually tackling it in the full spirit of these things. And obviously when we develop small relationships or kind of very close relationships in close proximity, we can have that transparency of what's happened with this to get this and how's it moved from A to B. It's how we then start to tackle that on a bigger scale. It kind of then obviously creates some really, really complex challenges because we're in different parts of the world from kind of our ingredients coming in and kind of how do we share that through. But I think there are a number of elements that kind of we've hit around transparency and sustainability. And what does that actually mean when we're asking people to be transparent? That also means we have to be transparent as a business too. And I'm afraid we don't actually operate in a culture that is used to actually sharing information so transparently. We're in a very competitive world, and we work in chocolate, which is a very competitive product, and working with cocoa inputs that are traditionally very, very competitive. So I think we have to be clear about, if we're asking for that sustainability and transparency, we need to be demanding it of ourselves as well in the relationships that we kind of engage with and conduct. And I think we've got a few challenges ahead in that context.
Absolutely, because you're talking about the way a system has operated for so many years. It has been the case for many chocolate manufacturers. They simply didn't know where the cocoa came from. They knew roughly the origin. They couldn't say as much as they'd wanted to. So that's a huge challenge. But tell me, where are you sourcing your cocoa from? Are you able to actually specifically track cocoa from farms or cooperatives? How close or how far down the value or up the value chain can you go?
Yeah, we only work with inputs that can be traceable, but we are working sometimes with families and sometimes through traders who are able to locate the origins of those materials for us. But I have to say, it's been a challenging journey to be able to kind of set out on that process and be able to work with inputs that have that level of information and the quality of that information around it, or in any meaningful content to be able to start applying it into a production system.
Absolutely, because it all comes back to the production itself. I wonder if I could go to you as well, Remy. What do you see is when we're talking about sustainability, the importance of it as well to the supply chain as well? How do you see this technology could be helpful with that as well?
Oh, it would be essential, at the moment, your ability to IP, commodity coming from the source is always relying on people, operating on the ground, and you are as good as the person, which will, once again, give you the certificate or vouch, for the origin of the good. If we are able to integrate that into a system, that would be essential. Once again, where most financiers operate, it's very often in the middle of the supply chain. It's very difficult today, even if we're all willing to do it, to finance farmers in Africa. It's a big challenge, So very often, you have a repartition of roles, which will basically concentrate, the financiers more from the port, to the destination, and you'll rely on the people for sourcing or for origination of the good. And these are the people we can actually play the role, in the current system. If we can, replicate that into an IT system, to create a flow with an F, not with PH, which will help us. I mean, that would be essential.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, because we're talking about the flow of food here as well, this kind of issue about the supply chain is critical for food supply as well, globally, if we're thinking of sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've been a few years in this market, and I'm seeing again what we saw in 2009 and 10 with the Arab Spring, where we had a total disruption in terms of supply demand of grain, which created unrest in a lot of countries in the world, and certainly we're seeing that at the moment. We had already, as we all know, a gap in terms of trade finance prior to COVID and prior to the Black Sea conflict, but that has been even made worse by the commodity, the recent events, which is basically putting the commodity price on a high level, which is basically lengthening the cycles. I mean, I've got clients exporting coffee and cocoa from West Africa. They haven't been able to ship anything for the past 3 months, because suddenly the vessels are not there anymore. They don't call the ports, and the logistic is a total mess. So for the same business that they used to have before, they need to do to do three times more. And then you have the restocking as well of the supply chain, where people realize that the good old days where you could just buy just in time are not there anymore. So the whole chain today is under immense stress, and you add that to the supply shock we have, especially on the wheat, veg oil, feed stuff as well.
Sure. And that's fertilizers as well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I call it the 5 Fs, feed, food, fertilizer, finance, and fuel. I mean, these are basically the kind of, unfortunate perfect storm of shock, that we're going through. And I'm very, I'm quite concerned about what's going to happen. So I think any attempt to, decrypt or create some lubricant, in the supply chains is going to help, because at the moment there's no doubt that for all the reason we just mentioned, it's slow moving, and any system which will help will be most than welcome.
Absolutely. And Raj, just to get your view on this one as well, how you see sustainability fitting with the work of Phlo Systems, because it strikes me as if they are two perfect companions in terms of being able to deliver certain sustainability goals.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, Phlo Systems can't change the geopolitical environment, unfortunately, but we can definitely make it make the flow of goods more transparent. That's for sure. And with transparency comes changing the entire ecosystem into the digital platform, not specifically our digital platform, but a digital platform. And I think what Remy really touched upon is absolutely accurate. The world of finance only looks at the middle piece. People forget about how it got there and what it took to make it go there. So I think one of the things which is critical to sustainability is trying to give access to some kind of a platform all the way to the farmers, down to the cooperatives, and then to the traders, which are then interlinked in a chain, which can then further advance that information into the insurance and the shipping companies and the brokers and the financiers or the alternative financiers. I think once that data comes through, the decision making on whether it is a sustainable trade becomes a lot more transparent and a lot more easier to advance those discussions. But again, it all really boils down to access to a platform or an app, which Phlo System actually has developed all the way down for the farmer, where you can trace and track exactly what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I mean, it opens up so many possibilities, but also it's becoming more and more kind of essential, because if you look at the rules and regulations, they're suggesting in the EU, the UK, California as well, outright banning any kind of imports where there is any suspicion that there has been forestry destruction or child labor or other issues like that. You've got to have the data to be able to show it came from this area. That lets you handle that risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, can I just ask if there's if there's any questions from the people that we have online at the moment, please stick them in the chat, because there's an opportunity to bring in questions at the moment. There is one question which came in earlier I'd like to ask everyone in the group, actually, and it's about this whole question about the real benefits that this system can specifically bring to the smaller and medium-sized traders, because we know the big ones, they have the IT expenditure, they have the ability and the vision to do it. But when it comes to the smaller players and the smaller opportunities, what do you think this could deliver? I wonder, Remy, if we could start with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a bit of experience with big traders in my career of spending millions of dollars for in-house system, which basically got nowhere, and then, after 18 months, relooking at, off-the-shelf solution. So yeah, it's a very critical issue, and it's essential, from the flow and the movement of goods, it's coming from the trading environment, and the trading is quite complex, from a movement of trucks, vessels, hedging in Chicago, foreign exchange risk, weather risk, credit risk. All that already is quite difficult, and if you add onto it, obviously the financial element, then it's essential to be able to capture all this information. There is at the moment definitely in Africa a portion of the market which is vastly unattended, which are these smaller traders, smaller or maybe even medium-sized, producers, exporters. Because as we all know, the traditional financiers, commercial banks have lost appetite for various reasons, and all are wrong sized. They don't have the size to deal with a transaction of less than $10 million. And these transactions are essential, especially on the food side, because they are linked to export of essential goods. And very often there is a time value attached to it. If you don't have you don't find a solution to export your cashew or your maize or import your wheat, then the harvest is gone, and then that's it. So not only the size matter, but the ability to respond quickly to such demand is essential. So small deals, if there are any solution to help those, that's for me very important.
Yeah, well, I just think of an example I came across in Zimbabwe, which was the simplest thing. There was one farmer in a village, and he knew that the price of sugar was 3 times as high in the village, which was 10 miles away, and he got his sugar there and did very well. And there was a glut where he was. So we very often see in a lot of developing markets, particularly where there's a lot of local production of food and staples, there is a trade. But if you can't see that opportunity, it's gone, because there's so much wastage, isn't there, I suppose? Yeah. I wonder if maybe going to you, Diana, as well. From your side, what are you seeing as the real benefits that you can see that will be brought to these smaller and medium-sized trainers and the earlier parts of the value chain?
Yeah, I mean, my angle is around sustainable development. And so for the longest time, even today, we tend to think of it as an intangible objective. How do we quantify it? Can we quantify it? And so I guess for small, medium-sized organizations, the benefit of our work is in actually saying, look, it can be a tangible process. It can be measured. We can certainly offer data in that regard. And we can offer a process that addresses the margin of error and therefore allows small and medium-sized enterprises to allocate, optimize finite resources. Resources are always finite. And therefore, drive their organizations forward in a manner that is compatible with the objectives that have to be achieved. Sustainable development has significant urgency to it. It's here to stay. So I think that is the value that I think small and medium-sized organizations can certainly derive from what we have been working on here.
Yeah, no, that resonates with me as well, because I do a lot of training around sustainability and ESG issues. And the whole point is it's all about a transition. You have to transition what you're doing. A lot of it is about information and information management. And you would immediately expect that the smaller and medium-sized enterprises simply don't have the resources or the ability to do it. So it's a great way of saying, let's go for sustainability right from the beginning. Let's not say this is another rich world thing that we can have at a later date. It's needed now. Yeah, absolutely. And Raj, I just wondered if you want to add any more other points. So do you think anything else we've missed? We've heard a lot of advantages that can be brought to SMEs, but from your perspective, what does it boil down to?
So I'll maybe give a different view. Over the last couple of months, I have been speaking with the team to a lot of private equity houses and alternative funders, and they've shown an immense amount of interest in our company. And the reason being is that they want to deploy and they want to find an alternative asset class, which is the commodity asset class. But they cannot, because they don't have the ability to actually get the right data and the right information to make a risk profile, which in turn leads to an investment decision. And there's some very large names out there who've been contacting us to actually deploy an X amount of capital into this asset class. So there is a huge demand for this, but there is the accessibility which is missing right now, and this is where we're connecting the dots, where we have clients who are using our system. We can draw data out of that. We can analyze the cash flow. We can analyze exactly where they would need those working capital finances. We can create an entire deal sheet for these people and present it to them for financing and making an eventual decision. So this is looking at it purely from a financing point of view to give them access to the kind of book which they would normally not have.
Absolutely.
If I may say something,
yes.
I mean, that's essential because, from an investment point of view, very often investors, LPs or subscribers, they will invest into a fund or vehicle, trusting that they have true visibility and transparency to where the funds are being used, and if they can rely on a system which gives them additional, trust, and confidence into the deployment of the fund, that's essential.
Yeah, and at Phlo Systems, we have a dashboard where they can actually manage their exposure. They can manage exactly, pinpoint where the capital deployment is, what geography, what commodity, what are the returns. And in fact, with one of the trade finance funds, we're trying to develop where they give access to our system to their investors, so that their investors understand exactly, you know, what kind of risks they're actually getting involved in, including the sustainability information.
Yeah, and I think that's so key because there are so many pension funds out there, asset managers, even VCs who are specifically looking for environmental or social credits out there. They're trying to say, how can we prove with this much of our balance sheet we're having an impact? So you need that kind of data. Excellent. Well, look, we're almost out of time. I've just got time to ask one final question to everyone. I'd like you to give your 1-minute view, but what do you think in the future, if we see how Phlo Systems systems are evolving, what other features and technology would you like to see integrated or will be integrated into it? So maybe if I start with you, Diana, what do you think could be, how could it be enhanced, what you can do with this system?
Well, I guess, again, from my angle and my perspective around sustainability, it is all about the data and how we can grow the availability of data and how we can continue to measure and quantify sustainable development so that indeed the many benefits that have been spoken of around sustainable development can actually be brought to the forefront. We can connect that with existing much bigger national, supranational frameworks and see how it all fits in, right? Because the problem is not only for the small and medium-sized enterprises, though most pertinent, but also how that all connects together to give us a picture of, well, we have sustainable development goals, but how do we know that we're making any progress on those, right? So it all fits together. So I suppose from my perspective, it's always about bringing in more data and using that data in a way that supports the sustainability of organizations.
Absolutely. Let's actually see what is happening in terms of sustainability performance. And Remy, from your side, aspirations for what can be done, or what are you looking forward to seeing being done with this technology going forward?
I already talked about tokenization and this narrow gap between physical and digital, but that's putting that aside. I would love, Raj, that you offer us next year a kind of AI, system where the system will have a judgment call on discrepancy on the BL, on the LC, and basically save us a lot of time, trying to put a judgment call on that. But no, I think, the moment we can get rid of all the paper and the documents, I mean, we're still operating both in trading and in trade finance the way our grandfather were operating, with all this paper. So that's about time that this industry is bound for a revolution and a change.
That's lovely put. And Raj, if you want to have the last word on what the system's going to become and what you hope it to become.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely, Remy. I've taken and noted the point you raised. We will try to maybe get artificial intelligence and machine learning to pretty much do all the operational work. Look, I mean, we have an ideal scenario, obviously, right? I mean, I hate to mention it, but blockchain being a buzzword for many years now. It's a model which theoretically works. In practice hasn't really been proven fully yet. It's been implemented partially. We have the capability, we have the ability to do it. We see the benefit of it. Unfortunately, from a cost point of view, it's not something which a lot of organizations are pushing forward towards. But in an ideal nearby future, we've built a system where farmers can input data and input their crop information. We've built a system where traders can digitize their entire operations, manage their risk, hedge their risk. And we've recently just finished building also the trade flow system, which is obviously critical for the customs declaration. And now finally, we're finishing off our finance system, which is finPhlo, which is connecting the dots and giving access to the funders to actually utilize some of the information and clients we have, but also some of the clients we're getting continuously on our platform. The ideal world is to connect all these three together by way of having machine learning, and it would automatically fit in a specific risk profile for an investor or a bank. And then it would become an automated tool to essentially, finance and assess the risk from an operations point of view, but also from a lender's point of view. We would really like to digitize that entire ecosystem end to end. That's the near future. The robotics and the machine learning and the artificial intelligence goes hands in hand. But I think, Remy, you might have to wait a year or two maybe until your BLs are perfect all the time.
Yeah, well, maybe you could have a word with Lambda at Google, the AI everyone's talking about at the moment. He thinks he's sentient, maybe you could hire him as well, or it, I should probably say. A great vision for the future there as well, because it's also about linking everything together, as you said. Wonderful. Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. So thank you very much to my speakers, Raj, Diana, Remy, and Sophie, who joined us earlier as well. And thanks to all of today's speakers for sharing their insights on the supply chain. So what I hope the webinar has shown to everyone today is that we need a new approach to deliver goods and we need a new approach to deliver the digital tools to small and medium-sized businesses if they want to really reap the benefits of digitalization. And we can see that Phlo Systems is very much developing those kind of systems going forward as well. So if you were unable to see all of the webinar today, or you would like to watch parts of it again, it will be available as an edited version later. And I'm also going to be producing a podcast bringing together the best of our discussions from the fireside chat and this panel we've just had. So thank you everyone for taking part in this very interesting webinar. If you want to get in touch with Phlo Systems, just use the contact details that you have for registering for this event. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, my company website, Kleos Advisory as well. And certainly do reach out if you want to talk to Phlo about what you could possibly organize or what you could possibly develop together, because there is a real opportunity here. There's an imperative, as we've heard, in terms of what needs to be done. And we're in difficult times at the moment, and anything that can reduce costs and open up opportunities is something to be embraced. So that's all from me. I wonder if I could just hand back to Sohrab. Sohrab, if you want to say any final words.
Yeah, thank you, Ted. And it was great hearing the feedback and comments from all the participants. It has given us good insights into what we need to do to continue enhancing our solution for the benefit of the traders and the supply chain participants. And we hope that others who have not been able to ask any questions today because of lack of time, feel free to ping us any point of time, and we are always happy to get into a one-on-one interaction to answer your questions and also share our experience on how you can benefit from digitalization, especially when it comes to the supply chain operations of an international trade kind of a business. So yeah, we would be very happy to discuss with any one of you who is interested to take this further. Thank you so much again for everyone for participating, and thanks Ted for organizing this.
My pleasure, Manu. So thank you, everyone. The webinar is over, and we will be in touch with information about video clips and a podcast in due course. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks,
cheers. Bye-bye.